What would happen if a vampire hunter becomes a vampire? A hunter becomes the prey? Well, this has been explored in the Marvel comic series What If? Dark. The Marvel Universe has infinite possibilities. One slightest change in an incident or a choice would change the whole course of history. What would happen if Peter Parker died instead of Gwen Stacy? Or if Ben Grimm bonded with the Venom symbiote? Or Moon Knight got killed by his foe Bushman? What if Dark takes the premise of the original What If series, but takes it to an extreme level of dark, true to its name? The issue is titled The Tomb of Dracula, where the story explores what would happen if Dracula had spared the demon hunter Quincy Harker's life. How did he end up turning a vampire hunter into a vampire? What happens next? Dracula's one small mistake. Dracula, the Lord of Vampires, is on a hunt in London. He has been waiting for his prey to make one mistake so that he can make his move. As Quincy Harker and his wife Sonia are celebrating their 50th anniversary in the opera, Dracula enters and heads straight towards the couple. The crowd leaves the room in fear and Dracula kills Harker. Finally. But what if this didn't happen? This is where the real story starts in the comic. As Dracula is flying to the opera, he smells fresh blood and changes his direction because Harker can wait. He leaps towards a woman, but an old man saves her, so Dracula bites the old man instead. The man is a doctor who gets an emergency call for a delivery of a child. As he goes to the pregnant woman, he bites her and drains her of life. The baby survives, and a friend of the woman takes him in and protects him from the doctor, who is now a vampire. Now, 27 years later in Transylvania, Dracula is looking back at his failed task of leaving Harper crippled instead of killing him. He is also aware of the little boy who was born that night. The boy has Dracula's blood because the old doctor bit his mother. The boy is a dhampir, half human and half vampire. He is considered greater and more powerful than a human. He has dedicated his whole life to slaying the vampires and vanishing them from the world. He is someone who can defeat Dracula and is after him to take revenge for his mother's death. So to end this threat, Dracula heads back to England. How powerful is the dhampir? Will he be able to defeat Dracula on his own? Blade, the vampire hunter. Upon reaching London, Dracula finds the boy because of the smell of his own blood inside him. The boy is muscular and strong and fights Dracula with wooden weapons attached in his outfit. The boy is almost losing until his team shows up. The team includes Rachel Van Helsing, Frank Drake, and Quincy Harker. The boy is named Eric Brooks, also known as Blade. All four of them have their reasons to take revenge on Dracula. He killed Rachel's parents and left a scar across her forehead. She was raised by Harker, who taught her how to hunt vampires and kill them. Frank Drake is a direct descendant of Dracula, but when his family left Romania, they changed their last names to Drake. Drake met Quincy's group, and after hearing their stories of taking revenge, he joined them. The group starts firing wooden weapons at the vampire lord, and he flies away from the place. But will Dracula be back? What will be his next move? The vampire slayer turns into a vampire? Dracula fled from the building, but not from London. He comes across a crowded carnival in the city, and in a turn to show who is the real ruler of this world, he summons an army of vampires. He starved them, tortured them, and kept them in a bad situation so that when they were released, they would create havoc in the world. As intended, the vampires started killing and biting the people, leaving the bloody bodies behind. Blade comes just in time to save everyone. He succeeds in killing a few vampires, and others lure him to Dracula. When he is alone, Dracula attacks him from behind and bites his neck, turning him into a full vampire. Eric is back at his home, where his lover Saffron Calder tries to talk to him, but he bites her neck instead, turning her into a vampire so that they could stay together forever. Eric then starts chasing Dracula, both of them in their vampire form, flying in the air. Eric declares he will not become a vampire slave for Dracula. So how does Eric manage to take his revenge on Dracula? A big sacrifice for one small mistake. Blade's team hesitates in trusting him now that he's fully a vampire. He reveals how he has gained none of the weaknesses that the vampires usually have, such as sensitivity to sunlight and having his human side in control. He is still the dhampir that he has always been. Blade then asks them to help him in his plan to defeat Dracula. Dracula is back in Transylvania, upset with the fact that the world is not the same anymore, where humans never rebelled and vampire slaves never turned on him. As he is preparing his army of vampires vampire slaves for a war that will be ensuing soon, he finds Blade inside a room. Blade has already killed all the vampires that were there in the room. His plan worked. Harker ensured that Dracula couldn't follow Blade's scent so that he could easily enter his castle. This one mistake of keeping Quincy Harker alive 27 years ago is costing Dracula a great deal of regret today. Now he is trying to make sure to not make that mistake again and threatens Blade that he can control him. This makes Blade angry because no vampire can control him. In a rage, he charges towards Dracula and attacks him with his wooden swords in both hands. With a final blow, he puts the sword in Dracula's heart, instantly killing him. Since Dracula is really undead, he can come back from death again and again. Blade came prepared for that situation as well. He calls Harker through his handheld transceiver and gives him a cue saying he is ready. Now with Dracula dead, so are all his vampires along with him, and luckily, they are all in the Transylvania castle. Harker asks him if he is sure of the decision one last time. Blade assures him that he might have been born as a half vampire, but he does not intend to die as one. So with that, he sits on the floor along with all the dead vampires. Harker wishes him a rest in peace, and a huge blast goes off in the whole castle. Quincy Harker, in his wheelchair, Rachel Van Helsing, and Frank Drake watch the fire engulfing the castle and its flames from a faraway land. Frank corrects himself, saying the vampire slayer's name is Eric, not Blade. After getting emotional for a moment, the three decide it is best to leave that place now that the work is done. Marvelous verdict. Eric Brooks was born in a tragedy. When his mother Vanessa went into labor, she was killed by a newly turned vampire. If it wasn't for one of the girls present in the room, he would not have survived that night. This whole premise of this story is interesting. The idea, the plot, and the characters all work well. Even the dark element is in the right place, but the execution somewhat faltered. Some of the characters and plots were not given the justice they deserved. The fight scenes of Dracula and Blade were good, but when Blade had to fight the vampires, the whole scene was summed up pretty quickly or not included, only showing the aftermath of the fight. Eric had a lot of potential, but his character was not explored enough. Even his introduction scene felt incomplete and abrupt when Dracula found him all of a sudden and Eric was ready to attack him. One of the scenes that bothered me was when Eric bit Saffron to turn her into a vampire so they could be together forever, but he planned to blow himself up all along with all vampires in Transylvania. What happened to Saffron then? Is she a vampire now? Is she upset at Eric for turning her into this creature against her will and then leaving her alone? So many loopholes in this scene. Blade is a favorite Marvel character for a lot of people out there. He is one of the most prominent supernatural figures in this universe. The portrayal of his character is amazing to see as a fan.
And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone.